Any subject can be exciting if you are teaching it with passion and excitement yourself. I'm going to share with you how we have truly made history come alive in our home, and it is a living, breathing thing that we all love to learn about. A while back, I asked the question whether or not you guys would be interested in seeing a series about how I teach different subjects in our homeschool, and a resounding number of you said yes. And the number one subject that you guys wanted to see was history, and thank you so much for that, because history is my number one favorite subject to teach and to learn about. And today we're going to talk all about how I teach history in our homeschool. Now, obviously, you know that I'm an eclectic homeschooler, so I do a combination of things across all of the subjects that we do. And for history, that is no different. I use a mix of unit studies, kind of with a Charlotte Mason flair in our homeschool. That has been my absolute favorite way to do history, and have found that it has been something that has helped our kids to really love learning about what has happened in our past and how that relates to what is happening right now. One of the huge benefits to doing history in a unit study, or particularly a Charlotte Mason approach, is that a lot of it can be done family style. So I don't have to teach each of my kids history individually on their level. We do this all together as a family, and that really saves a lot of time, number one, and number two, it's really fun for us to be able to engage in this together and really learn together and grow together and build experiences around what we're learning about. I'm going to share with you today a lot of the resources and types of things that we use in our history units that we do. I will leave links to all of these resources that I'm going to talk about today in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. I love using unit studies for history because it allows us to dive deep into a particular time period and really learn it inside out. I am definitely drawn to literature-based curriculum and using the Charlotte Mason idea of living history books. Living history books are books that are kind of more narrative format versus reading a textbook. So it's something that makes history come alive to you. It's told through the perspective of a person who lived it, or events that happened, a little bit more story format versus just a bunch of facts. And that makes history so much more personal and relatable as we read it with our kids and even for ourselves. We have been using Charlotte Mason's Modern Times curriculum over this last year for a kind of core for our history, and we have taken this and molded it and made it into what works for us. We really stop and pause when we get to a certain time period or event that our kids are really interested in and want to learn more about, and kind of create our own unit study based around that thing. So for example, right now we are studying World War II, and I'm going to show you some of the resources and kind of how we tied those things in to a Charlotte Mason approach to our history. In a Charlotte Mason homeschool, kind of the concept of teaching history is where you go through and read a story, and then when you're done reading, you have your children narrate back to you or recall back to you in as much detail as they can remember what you just read about, rather than doing a worksheet. And so that's kind of how we approach history. I will often have one of my kids start out their narration, and then I'll have them pause and move on to another kid and pick that up, or have one of them recall everything that they can, and then other kids fill in pieces of things that maybe were missed. And then I also like to throw in some questions that I'll ask them to have them really think about things and be able to really recall back to me the information that they have learned. And that's kind of my way of assessing what they have learned from the lesson. That's kind of how we cover the main information in our history lessons. And then we also have a lot of supplemental things that we kind of add in to go along with it and to dive deeper into the things. After we finish our core history lesson and narration, I will generally add in one or two of the following things to round out our lesson for the day. One of the things that I like to do is have these Dover historical coloring books that go along with whatever we're studying at this time. So this is one about World War II, and my kids will look through here and we will photocopy some of the pages in here. And then a lot of times while I'm reading our history lesson, I will let the kids color a picture that goes along with what we're learning about. By keeping their hands busy, it keeps their mouths quiet and their brains open to listen and hear what's going on. And so I find these are a great asset to go along with our history lessons. The other Charlotte Mason aspect that we tie in that I haven't been perfect about doing all the time, but I'm trying to be better, is using a book of centuries. A book of centuries is basically a timeline of history from the beginning until modern times. And in the book, you have each double page spread covers one century in history. And so then as you're learning about different things over the years, throughout your history lessons, you have your kids open up to the century that you are learning about and find a place on the page to write down just some of the main events that you have learned about. This really helps them to really kind of piece together what's happening in America at the same time as something happening in China or in Europe or whatever. They can kind of see how history fits together like a puzzle and how it all works together. And so this is a great way to just kind of keep track of things that you have learned, but also helping to understand history as a broader picture. Another big aspect of this is that we love to utilize the library. So anytime we are starting a new time period that we are going to dive deep into, I will go to the library and check out pretty much every book that I can find on that subject at the library and bring those things home so that our kids can then just dive into whichever one looks interesting to them. Sometimes if there are ones that look good enough that I know we're going to refer back to later, I will purchase those for us to have for our own home library. And I want to show you a couple that we found that are really cool. This one is the D.K. Smithsonian World War II Visual History. And this is such a good book. We have a couple of the D.K. books and we just love them. There are so many photos in here that really help you to visualize what was going on and so much just information packed into there. This is another fun World War II time period one that I found. It's called Hoodwinked. This is all about how the different armies use deception and misinformation and that kind of stuff to trick the enemy in order to invade and distract and cause sabotage and things like that. So this one has been a fun one. Sometimes we'll even tie in subjects like art into our history thing, where I will have our kids draw a picture of something we've learned about. So for example, this is a picture of the Hindenburg that my son drew when we learned about the disaster of the Hindenburg. And then a lot of times at the end of a period of 2 weeks, I will have my kids choose one of the things that we've learned about over that last week or 2 weeks and write a short report about something that they learned during that time.
My middle schooler will normally type up a full-page report, and my elementary boys will generally handwrite something, and then that will take the place of what they have to do for language arts that day. This is a great way to cross over into multiple subjects.
Going along with our kids when they do a report, a lot of times I like to then have them do some kind of presentation with their report. We will have my husband come in and my kids will present in front of the family their report that they have written. And so that gives them a little bit of practice doing presentation skills. And so that's been a fun aspect to tie into our unit studies as well. When you're reading about different countries and different events that had happened, it ties in perfectly to geography, where you can then go look up in an atlas or on a map or a globe where those things took place. And then sometimes I will print out maps and then have my kids label either certain battles that might have taken place or countries. And so this is one that we have done recently where they labeled all of the countries, the Axis powers and the Allied powers. So that fit along with our World War II unit that we're doing. Another aspect of what we do in our unit studies then is reading biographies about people who lived during that time. We listened to on audiobook the story of Eric Liddell from YWAM Publishing's Christian Heroes Then and Now series. He was living in China during the Japanese invasion of China and kind of what was happening over on that continent during the war. And we also will read little short ones. Like this is a good one. If you haven't seen these, the 10 Boys series, there's also a 10 Girls series. This one is 10 Boys Who Didn't Give In. And so we read the story in here of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who stood up against the Nazis and ended up being arrested and martyred for his faith in trying to help Jews escape to Switzerland during the war. And we will also do some read alouds that tie into the time period that we're doing, again, to just make that history more personal and relatable, even though they might not actually be historical fact. There's so much that we can learn from historical fiction just by learning about how people interacted during that time period period, or what they ate or what they looked like, what they talked about, how they behaved, and all of those kind of things. And so a couple of the ones that we just finished, this one called Run for Your Life. That's a story about two boys that were in Poland. One of them was a Christian and the other one was a Jewish boy that his family was hiding, and they get captured by the Nazis and taken away on a train, and they end up escaping off of the train, and they are in Germany trying to survive in Germany until the end of the war. And so this was an exciting book that all my boys really loved. A little bit intense for younger kids. Make sure you pre-read that section ahead of time. One that we are just now reading is, let me see, can you see that? Number the Stars by Lois Lowry. This one we just started a couple of days ago, so I can't give you a whole lot of information about that, but I've heard such good things about it and I'm excited to keep reading through that. Another thing that I really like to tie in is looking up either YouTube videos or documentaries or things that we can find that are age appropriate for our kids in order to, again, make that history relatable and make it come alive and feel like it really happened. And I feel like watching a short show or documentary can be really beneficial and fun. And that is how I teach history in our homeschool. And again, there's no one right or wrong way to do this. It is individual to each family. This is just what works for us and how we enjoy learning about history. How do you like to learn about history? Drop that in the comments below. I'd love to see what resources you use and how you incorporate history into your homeschool. And if you're interested in learning about how I teach any other subjects, make sure you subscribe. The next video in this series is going to be about how I teach language arts. If you want to learn more about how history fits into our homeschool day, you can check out this video here that's about how we do block scheduling in our home to fit in all of our subjects. Thanks so much for watching today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button below, and I will see you next time. Bye.